Hello everyone, this is Lala, and today I'm going to be reviewing slash recapping and expressing my thoughts on the challenge Cutthroat, which is the final season in Era 2. So I want to give some context about my relationship with this season. So I started watching the show with season 31, i.e. Vendettas, because I'm someone who came from Big Brother when it comes to reality TV, so when I heard that they were on the challenge, I decided to start watching it then. I had a friend in high school who wanted me to watch the show, I believe around the time Battle of the Exes 2 was on, but I just decided not to. So essentially, I watched from season 31 onwards live. And while I heard about things that happened in the past seasons, I didn't really rewatch it yet, since I didn't know where to start and all that jazz. And when I do rewatch stuff from the past, I always want to go back to the beginning. So it was somewhere before season 39 came out where I decided, okay, now it is time for me to start watching all the seasons that I missed out on. I didn't want to go too far back because it usually doesn't have any familiarity with the current season that I'm watching, and the first 9 seasons are pretty much impossible to find. So I decided, okay, I'm going to look up the Reddit to see which seasons they recommend watching, and season 20 came up, and I felt like that was a season where it was old enough to the point where I could watch it and understand most of the history between the veterans that were on the show concurrently up until that point in the era 4, especially in the late era 4. So I thought if I watched from 20 onward, I would understand it. So technically, Cutthroat is the first season that I did not watch live, since I watched from 20 all the way to 38, where I watched 20 to 29, 20 to 30 for the first time. Then I rewatched the Era 4 for the first time since watching them live. And then I rewatched from season 10 to season 19. And then I started rewatching some of the older seasons, like the first 9 seasons that I could find. And then after that process, I then started from season 1 up until now, where this current rewatch that I'm watching in chronological order from the very beginning, from the very first time, where I'm recapping them now, is where I am. And I watched Cutthroat over a year ago. So watching the season now for this video, with me understanding the context of everyone on this cast chronologically for the very first time, it would it had me wondering whether I was going to like it more or less. So now that that context of my viewing experience is over, I definitely do like this season. I know a lot of people complain that many of the big names weren't on it, but honestly, I found it refreshing. I felt like the Kennys, the Wesses, the Evans, and the Evelyns, and all that stuff, their stuff kind of just sucks the room out of everything. And one of the things that I liked about, especially the first 2 eras, is that if someone was on one season, they'd give them a break the next season, and then they bring them back the season afterwards. So you don't have the exact same people on season after season after season after season. They like giving people breaks. And I felt like this was a great chance for a lot of the Freshmates 2 crew, the Ruins crew, meaning the rookies, and some of the other rookies who debuted within the last few seasons to make a name for themselves and to see if they would sink or swim. And many of them did swim while others sunk. This was also the start of where a lot of the late era 1 people, so like the Durrells, though he wasn't on the season, the Dereks, and the Brads, were really starting to retire or take very long hiatuses, since a lot of them were starting their families. I really do like the 3-team format, and what I liked about these teams is that they were pretty balanced when it comes to the competition scale, which is something that I really appreciated, and it didn't make it boring. Each of the teams had their own interesting dynamic that I really liked. There's definitely a decent amount of drama, though not a whole lot of drama, especially compared to the Ruins. So some people could be disappointed by that, but I found it to be a very refreshing watch. Though I don't think it's going to be one of my favorites. I don't think it's a great season, but I think it is a solid to good one. So yeah. This would arguably be the final season that really had these big teams as the format. And since Era 3 was mainly about the relationships that you had with other people, so we had a lot of partner seasons or even some more individualized seasons, it definitely caused a lot of people to sink or swim in that element. But we'll talk more about that in Era 3. So, the season and the episode starts off with the cast running through some sort of forest or street in the nighttime, where they are introduced to TJ, who mentions that they are in the Gulag in the Czech Republic. The people who arrive last are the team captains, so this is Emily, Siobhan, and Camilla. The red team in this order is chosen with Camilla choosing Dunbar, then Tori, Brad, with the two now being married, Paula, Tyler, and Melinda, who is in the process of divorcing Danny, Chet, Mandy, and Brandon. And Camilla mentions his color for some reason, as it would be good to have some flavor, and apparently she called him the N-word several times in the season, but of course that didn't make it onto the air. The green team by Siobhan in this order is chosen to be Vinny, Laurel, Abram, and Sarah, who did not want to be picked, Dan, Aya, Luke, Cara Maria, and JD. The blue team that Emily chose in this order is Bananas, Jen, Derek, Emily, Ty, Teresa, Derek, Katie, and Eric. TG tells them that only one team will get paid per challenge, and whichever team wins will win over $500,000. The losing team have to nominate one guy and one girl. The losing teams have to nominate one guy and one girl, where one person from each gender will be booted. Abram is enjoying being single, where Paula and Jen really hope that they can win, since they are on their 7th and 5th seasons. And I find it funny that they're showing this conversation here, where we see them several episodes in the season arguing over both of them being losers due to the amount of seasons that they've lost. Dan does not drink anymore, especially after what happened on the island, but he is having fun with the others, and we see Abram and Cara Maria getting flirty immediately, since they are both oddballs. So Cara always liked weirdos, and it's kind of weird watching this now, knowing what was revealed on the interwebs on season 40 pertaining to this relationship. Laura wants to wrestle Siobhan, who is not into it whatsoever, since they are on the same team, and Laura is not leaving her alone at all, and Siobhan is getting pissed off. Laurel is continuously taunting Siobhan as she is walking away, and Laurel makes fun of her booze. Siobhan doesn't even end up remembering what happened since she's so drunk. The first challenge is gas problems, where they have to put together a large puzzle, but there is a layer that has a lock, where they need to remember a code in a room that is too smoky, where they have to run somewhere to remember, and it's just really confusing overall. The challenge was fine, but kind of awful to watch as well, with the gas stuff fumigating the room or tunnel that they were in. The gray team wins, mainly due to Abram's leadership, and the voting is a secret ballot this season, and I really liked this twist and the implementation of it. The red team votes in Brandon and Camilla, and the blue team votes in Emily and Derek. Teresa and Camilla are arguing about sweatpants or something along the lines of that. It was really confusing. And Teresa tells Camilla that she's a stupid bitch, and Teresa wants to pick on her and to get into her head, and this really is just nonsensical. And Teresa looks stupid as hell in this moment. And then sizing up someone who's literally like a foot smaller than you, really is just pathetic. And Teresa's doing all this because she feels safe. Ugh, whatever. Tori, of all people, is calming Camilla down and reassuring her. Handcuffs is the elimination, where it's essentially a version of pole wrestle, but they're holding on to two elastic rings. Brandon, of course, beats Derek, and Camilla, of course, beats Emily, though the ladies' version was a bit closer. I don't have much to say about either of them. I guess Emily went from leader to the first boot, though she was only a leader because she was dead last. Derek was there, and then he wasn't. I guess it's the trend of gay men getting thrown into eliminations / booted early in the seasons, but neither one of them are one-season wonders, so yeah. Abram is telling some random-ass ghost story, since people think that the house is haunted, and I don't blame them for thinking it just from looking at the house from the screen, and Carmela tells people that she and Abram like biting and playing with one another. Mandy is attracted to Chet, and Laura is telling people that Chet and Mandy were banging upstairs and calling Mandy a whore, causing the two women to argue with one another. Where she calls Laura a fat Amazon bitch. I could see the Amazon parts, but Laura is nowhere near fat, and Chet says that he gets dumber after looking at Laura. We do see the two of them cuddle with one another, so was Laura right, essentially? Kind of, since Chet is kind of throwing shade at Mandy in the confessionals, describing this scene. Dunbar, Brad, and Tori decide to lock in their votes for their team, and the couple are talking about starting their family with the money, since they are planning on retiring after this season. The challenge is called Brainbusters, where they will be suspended upside down to match color-coded things that I don't know the name of, and they essentially did this challenge last season. I do think it is a cool challenge, since it's many people from a team going upside down and then passing the tool across from one another and to one another. The blue team wins the challenge, and Camilla and Mandy knows that they are on the chopping block. And it's interesting that Mandy calls herself a rookie, but that's how it was seen as during this era, I guess, which we all know will change with people who are on their second seasons. And Abram realizes that he screwed up by sitting out of the challenge and directing them. And JD and Carmelia are also on the chopping block for being weaker. Carmelia and JD are nominated to go into elimination from the Grey team, where Brandon and Mandy are going in for the Red team. And Brandon is annoyed because he's going in again, where Brad is kind of just nonchalant about it. Mandy was expecting it to be a tie for Camilla, or her against Camilla, and complains to Chet about it, where he lies about not voting for her, and he's bragging about it to Brad and Dunbar. It's honestly just kind of a douchey look, though I get him talking about how this is a business trip. Back up off me is the elimination, where they are tied to one another and have to fight to knock off their barrel, and it's a really good elimination, where we will get one of the most classic moments from the show, and especially the season, from it. Brandon easily went against JD, and Carmelia easily went against Mandy. After the elimination, Brad is pretending that he feels bad for Brandon, but the latter is not buying the bullshit that he is selling, and Brad justifies that doing the right thing isn't the way to win the season. And I find this ironic because when he is on the other side, he complains about it over and over and over and over again, and he expects people to see his point of view. So it's just the hypocrisy of it all. We then see a night camera of Abram and Carmelia fooling around, and it borderline looks like an OnlyFans porno, where they end up hooking up in the washroom, where most of the cast is literally listening to them. Abram comes out with a bunch of scratch marks all over his body, and it is just a mess. JD was essentially a forgettable nothing on the season, and I know he comes back for Battle of the Seasons too, but that seemed more circumstantial due to the format of needing specific people or a specific amount of people from specific seasons. Manda was pretty fiery this season, with her getting into it with Laurel and then having a somewhat hookup with Chet this season, so I see why she came back despite not lasting long at all here. So the cast is having fun at a club, and then we move back to the house where a bunch of people are in the tub, where Paula and Emily are kissing because Paula finds Emily attractive, and Easy decides to join in, where Laurel calls him was it purple shirt? I don't even remember. But she's essentially making fun of his shirt, and then she really starts going in on him, calling him ugly and fat and how he can't hook up with anyone in the house. And Laurel is just drunk as hell, as she calls him a figure 8 person, where no one would touch him on the street, and makes fun of him for being a redhead and having a tiny dick. Honestly, this is definitely uncomfortable to watch, and despite what it looks like, apparently Eric went in on Laurel's appearance first, but they decided to cut that out due to him being more sympathetic due to his size. And from what I read and from what I remember being discussed online regarding the reunion, a lot of the cast didn't side with Eric. And we've seen in seasons before and after this where Eric does act like this, so it is believable. Eric is talking about how he lost 35 pounds and ends up venting to Dan about all of this happening. Bedhead is the daily where they have to jump over a large surface to land on a bed, and there is a series of beds. The daily was okay, and there really isn't anything else to say about it, in my opinion. Siobhan decides to not do the challenge, and Abram is trying to do the challenge, or he's trying to talk her. He is trying to calm her down, but it really is to no avail. I don't know if Siobhan didn't do it because she was traumatized by her boob job scenario on the ruins. Sarah decides to go in on Siobhan for losing due to her being on their team, and why the hell does Siobhan do these things if she isn't going to try, and how she should go home. Honestly, I'm definitely on Sarah's side here, and Siobhan really doesn't have much of an explanation, mentioning that she would do anything else. But honestly, just based on her very short and limited challenge career, I don't know about that, especially with what happens later on in the episode. The red team ends up winning the challenge, and Siobhan says that she would nominate herself, where there's discussion about voting Vinny in, which pisses him off, especially because Sarah is pitching it and they have a history from last season. The Bloom team discusses putting in Eric and Katie, where she mentions that Johnny also DQ'd during the challenge, and they start to go back and forth. Anyways, the nominees are Eric and Katie from the blue team, and Vinny and Siobhan from the gray team. Paula is yelling about Johnny Bananas and how she does not want to be around him, since she is clearly not over what happened on the island, where Siobhan throws a turkey at him and the two end up kind of arguing, where she throws more food at him, but Bananas really isn't taking any of it seriously. Katie is yelling at Emily since she states that she is next as a rookie, and Tyler decides to defend Emily. Ty decides to defend his ex Emily, and it really doesn't go well, since she ends up smacking his hand from. Sorry. Katie ends up smacking Ty's hand from her. He calls Katie a bitch, and he says that he will send her in once again if she comes back, where she approaches him, and she has to be held back by Brandon, and she yells at him for wanting to fight women. It's just a complete and utter mess. Ty literally says that he is going to hit the shit out of Katie, and absolutely nothing is done. Not only does production not reprimand him, but they bring him back for several more seasons. So it kind of just shows how the women weren't protected on the show, especially at this point, and how the men were rewarded by their degenerate misogyny. But luckily, Ty didn't actually hit a girl or anyone on the show during his time on it, but the fact that they even let it get that far says a lot, where things could have gone very wrong, and they felt comfortable airing this, which is yikes. Katie decides to take her tirades towards Bananas, where he also calls her a cancer to the team. Katie is really mad, and she cries to Brandon because she has a black eye from the challenge, is going to the gulag, and was turned on by her friends. The gulag is cancelled at the moment, so they are all having a good time and decide to go to the club, where someone ends up punching Bananas, where he fights a random, and he throws that person down the stairs, and he's held back by Siobhan after. Sorry, no. What am I meaning? Sorry. He is held back by Brandon, so now Bananas also has a black eye. Sarah has a calm conversation with Siobhan after their disagreement earlier on in the episode, but it doesn't really work out well regarding them actively making up. The elimination is Die Hard, where they have to roll on the side of the dice in a square block, and they have to do this standing up, and they can't touch the ground, and I find this to be an okay enough challenge. This kind of reminds me of that Vita competition that they did in Big Brother 16, but it's obviously different because they're in the cube instead of on top of the cube. So Eric beats Vinny, and Siobhan quits before doing the elimination, which just makes it look even more pathetic because she refused to do the challenge and then she refused to do the elimination. Vinny and Eric randomly decide to exchange some words randomly after the elimination, and the blue team is not happy that he is back. Probably because. Siobhan ends up quitting because she knew she was going to lose, and they really didn't want the liability Eric back. And Katie isn't happy with this, since she knows that, especially because she didn't earn her safety, she'll be thrown in again, and she'll have to prove herself. Vinny didn't do much whatsoever, outside of his random tantrum at the end of the episode, but I'm shocked that he got another season after this, since this is the second season in a row where he did really poorly. He really isn't a notable personality, and did poorly twice, but I guess his connection to Sarah gave him another season. Siobhan was fun with her arguments with Laura and Sarah, and she is funny, though in an unintentional way, but quitting the challenge and the elimination is just really pathetic. I see why she was not called again after this, as the show just wasn't for her. I'm shocked it took them 3 seasons to finally realize this. We start the episode with Abram and Carmaria kissing up and down on the piano that he is playing, and they're annoying the hell out of the cast, and probably every single viewer watching this. Luke and Dave are talking about Camilla's boobs and she is sexually attracted to bananas. Katie is speaking to some of the others about her team being fake as hell, where she and Eric know that they're going to be nominated again. Johnny speaks to Ty about booting their weakest players and getting rid of the other team's strongest players, where Johnny does not want Eric weakening them like in the Gauntlet 3, and this is under the assumption that Ty is one of the stronger players just due to his physique. Bottleneck Stampede is where they have to race through a bunch of bottlenecks, and I believe that there are 5 sets of them positioned differently, where you can shove and block others from it too. It's a really great watch in my opinion, as some people just run and other people block others. The red team wins the challenge and Katie volunteers herself to go into the gulag, but she probably did that because she knew she was getting voted in anyways, and Eric ends up pitching for Ty to go in. Johnny asks for the two of them to do laps, and Eric refuses to do that, where the gray team just deliberates, with Aya throwing Carmaria under the bus because she was doing poorly before Abram helped her. And Cara mentions that she was the first one to make it to the end. The nominees are Aya and Luke for the gray team, and Carrie Lee and Eric for the blue team. And it was actually a tie in the first round between Eric and Ty, but then they had to revote. Jen tries to approach Eric to explain why she flipped her vote after the tie, and he blows her off, and he's just acting up, where she mentions that she tried defending him, but he's just not hearing any of it. Camila is getting flirty and close to Johnny Bananas, and Brad doesn't like this, where he ends up ranting about it to Eric, since he sees it as a liability. Aya continues to complain about Carmaria not going in and doing well, and Carmaria uses her vagina to stay in the game. That's what Aya is stating. Brad speaks to Camilla about her needing to avoid Johnny Bananas, and Paula agrees with Brad's sentiments, since he screwed her over on the island, and Camilla doesn't take this serious. And it's ironic because Paula's complaining about this situation without tweeting what's going to happen to her at the end of the season. Brad decides to speak to Johnny about this, and the latter thinks that it's really stupid, and I don't even know why Brad approached him about this. TG arrives at the house and mentions that the guys need to shave their faces, so he gave them razors. The elimination is SWAT, where everyone is chained by their necks to the table, and they literally slap one another with the swatters. If they get to round 3, they have to do this while holding a bucket from the ground. Katie beat Aya, and Luke beat Eric, and this is such a silly elimination. Aya seems like someone who could definitely be fiery with the amounts that she complained, but she was invincible before her episode boot, and she never actually confronts Carmaria. Her not coming back is fine with me. They definitely wanted us to feel bad for Eric regarding the argument with Laura and him being thrown in, but he kind of just put himself in the situation, and like I mentioned before, his story arc, or non-story arc, is kind of just tired at this point, and it's clear that he's running out of gas pertaining being on the show. The episode starts with Dan thinking about breaking his sobriety for the first time, to the point where he's calling his mother to stay focused. The fact that this is getting so much focus had me wondering that he was going in, but I guess they just decided to do it for some sort of continuity, or to give him some sort of focus throughout the season, bit by bit. Ty ends up engaging in some sort of bet where if he throws the ball in a cup, he gets money, and if he loses, he has to show his cock. Paula jokes about how Ty would be more likable if he were gay, and Ty mentions that showing a guy's cock isn't gay. Ty mentions that Brandon made the bet, so Brandon would be gay, and now he is getting riled up. Brandon and Ty are joking around with one another, but it really isn't a joke, and Brandon mentions that he could beat his ass, and Ty is ready to do whatever physical contact. They start yelling about who can get physical or not, and Johnny tells Ty to get his ass to bed, and Brandon said the same thing earlier on, which caused them to argue to begin with. Dan decides to shave his head, which had me even more worried about what was happening with him, but I guess it was just a smokescreen. Surf's Up is the daily where they have to jump on a surfing platform in the air, and then they have to swim back. Honestly, I really like the first part of the challenge, but it does get boring with the second part, so I'm very mixed on it overall. Chad gets injured during the challenge, and he's getting very pale as hell. Almost like green, like. The gray team wins the challenge, and we have Ty and Katie nominated from the blue team, and Brennan and Camilla nominated from the red team. Paula tells Camilla that she wants her to come back, and she tells her that people do not trust her due to bananas, and getting close to the red team is the smartest thing to go, since that is Camilla's team. So Ty and Emily dated in the past, and they're kind of pranking one another, with Emily spraying a bunch of shaving cream on him and his bed, where Ty ends up throwing a large-ass plant on her bed. She throws the plant back on his bed, and then he tramples over the bed with her underneath it, and it's kind of just weird to watch. Of course, they start arguing, and people rightfully assume that Ty is a lunatic. Pull Me Over is the reverse tug of war, where they have to push their opponent back, and I really do like this elimination. Ty is initially in the lead as he gains a point, but he falls over in the second round against Brandon, when Ty was close to winning this one. Ty remains leaning on the ground, and even after he's supposed to get up so they can restart the next round, he is still on the ground, and this causes for him to be eliminated, where everyone is essentially making fun of Ty and is cheering up Brandon. Anyways, Camilla also beats Katie in this elimination pretty easily. So, Ty was definitely a cannonball of drama, and while he definitely made me very uncomfortable at times, a lot of times, he did bring a different energy to the season, and I do see why he was a shoo-in to be a returnee, while he was never as ridiculous as he is in this season. He is definitely one of the standouts in the season, whether you like it or not, especially pertaining to rookies. Katie definitely had an interesting arc in the season with consistently being thrown in, and I found her a lot more memorable here than her last few seasons. I see why she retired for over a decade after this season, though she was stating that she wanted to retire after the ruins, and her return on 40 was mainly circumstantial, but we do see her on All Stars, well after she becomes a wife and a mother. The red team are feeling very confident about their chances, and Chet returns, where he tells them about what happened in the hospital, though he says that the hospital said that he should not compete for another day. Johnny and Derek are worried with Ty gone now, since they were expecting him to be thrown in over and over again, but now they have to go in and the quote-unquote cut too much fat off strategy that they did in the last few seasons kind of backfired here. Brandon feels comfortable with his team now, and he's sure that he won't go into another gulag, which is definitely foreshadowing. TG comes to the house to speak to Chet, and it's clear that he is being pulled from the game because Chet has a concussion. Chet definitely had a moment in the season with his weird-ass showmance with Mandy, and then his unfortunate DQ, where it seemed like he would have made it very deep on the season with his team, as he was very good, well-positioned in his team. I did find his confessionals to be pretty good, and I'm glad this wasn't the last of him. Skyhook is the daily where they have to climb through a bunch of hoops above the water and shoot all the balls in the basket, and I thought this was a nice challenge to see how all the teams coordinated. The gray team wins the challenge, and we see a bunch of infighting with the red team about the performance, where the nominations are Emily and Derek from the blue team and Melinda and Brandon from the red team. Melinda is shocked that she is nominated since no one told her that she was going in, and these people are her friends. And I forgot about Tori pretty much melting down because she had to go against Melinda on the Gauntlet 3. So I forgot about that until I just remembered it now that I'm recording it. And no one told Melinda that she was going in, and Paula is shocked that someone voted in Brad, since these are anonymous votes, and this anonymous vote for Brad will definitely come up once again. So they go out to the club, and for some reason, Camilla admits that she did vote for Brad since he performed poorly in the challenge, and this ends up spreading to the team, where Tori confronts Camilla about it, where she tells Camilla that she'll go in every single time because of this. Like Camilla wasn't going to get thrown in every single time after this anyways. Entitled as Brad and Tori rant and rave about it, like they're immune despite them performing poorly, and really never being the best on their team. And it's a sign of what's to come with Camilla's career, with her slamming her drink on the table, causing the drink to completely break and shatter. And Tori mentioned that she voted in her real-life friend Melinda over her, and that won't be the case anymore. Camilla speaks to Paula and she starts to have a meltdown where Paula states that she does not believe Camilla whatsoever and she sunk her own ship. And Paula's just very unempathetic. Though it is interesting because whenever Paula's in this situation, she wants everyone to feel so sorry for her. Handcuffs is the elimination, and we already saw this elimination in the first episode. Melinda easily has no chance against Emily, and the predictable results ends up happening. Brandon does end up losing to Derek, which really isn't shocking, since it's something that Derek in general is just really good at, and we've seen this in the past and even in the future. Paula and Jen end up going at it after the elimination, as Paula is advising Jen about what she needs to do with her team. Paula calls Jenny a stupid bitch, and they both make fun of one another for never winning a season, and it's a very entertaining and campy fight in my opinion. Melinda was kind of just there this season and didn't have much game time at all, despite her supposedly being fun, according to what people said on the season. This might be the furthest she ever made it onto the flagship show, but it's clear that there's just nothing left in the tank for her pertaining the main flagship show. Brandon definitely had a great showing in the season. He won 3 eliminations, though they may not have been against the best competition. He got into some drama and showed more of his personality. It's kind of a shame that he didn't keep up the same energy in the future seasons, but he did get many more seasons, which wouldn't have happened without his performance here. It is Dunbar's 26th birthday, and Emily rips Carmaria's suit, where a bunch of people end up pranking the people in the pool, and it's all kind of just fun, and Laurel ends up ripping Paula's shirt, and they end up wrestling nude. Laurel is speaking to Tori and Paula about how she wants to get rid of Cara Maria. And she is writing Abram to get by in the challenge, or at least that's what Laurel is accusing Cara Maria of. Where Paula and Tori also make it known that they want Camila gone. So they're pretty much just bitching about their supposedly weak teammate on each of their teams. Give Me a Hand is where they have to walk across a tightrope in between 2 buildings, and this challenge is nerve-wracking to watch in general. Tori and Brad essentially don't do the challenge since they already lost and the blue team wins the challenge ecstatically. The red team talk about how Camilla did well in the challenge, while Brad and Tori know that they suck, but it really doesn't matter anyways, since it's clear that the performance of the teammates doesn't really matter, but the politics does. Abram blames Laurel for being a poor performer, and she thinks that it is bullshit, since she has played a lot better than Cara Maria throughout the entire season, though Laurel has no issue with going in. That isn't the point. It's just the scapegoating that is really bothering her, essentially. The nominees are Dunbar and Camilla from the red team, and Dan and Laurel from the gray team. Camilla rants to Johnny about her shitty-ass team because they're using her to win a challenge for once, i.e. Brad and Tori, as she's making fun of them for being winless, despite them doing this a few times, as they're just scared of everything. Dunbar is shocked by the vote, especially since Paula was the one who voted him in, and he'll definitely remember this for later on in the season. And Brad is ranting about their team dynamic being chaotic without a leader. And it's clear that Brad isn't a good leader, which we've seen in prior seasons, and we will see in future seasons as well. So, Sarah and Laurel rant about how Cara Maria sucks, and Laurel mentions that everything about Cara Maria is can't. Laurel also rants about Luke wanting to play fair and Dan being in another world. So she's just sick of everyone but Sarah on her team. Laurel picks a fight with Abram, who mentions that Cara Maria has performed better than she has, and Laurel thinks that it is completely absurd. And he is letting his dick influence the game in politics. Die Hard is the elimination where Dunbar beats Dan and Laurel beats Camilla, though Laurel is not happy as she's ranting about Luke/Cara Maria/Abram outright sucking. Based on what we saw on the episodes, Camilla had a great rookie season. She won a few eliminations, was a strong rookie, benefited from being in an underdog position, and she got into a few fights throughout the season. It does annoy me that she was making racist comments, allegedly, to Brennan as early as her first season, but they covered it up, and it just showed the pathology of the producers and them being performative about their supposed civil rights activism and care. But we will get into that way more into the future. So Dan was nowhere near as entertaining as he was on the island, but I appreciate him for coming in sober, sticking with it, and still being quirky. But he was better off not being on the show, and I find that to be very respectable. Since some people just come back over and over and over and over again, knowing that the show isn't good for them, and then they break whatever sobriety that they have. Laurel and Sarah are talking about planning for the final, and Laurel feels stabbed in the back, where the both of them are planning on throwing their challenge to get Cara Maria out. We do see her and Sarah complaining about... Sorry. No. We hear Cara Maria complaining about Sarah and Laurel to Luke and Abram, and both sides are just bitching about one another, and the great team's dysfunction is just not getting any better. Brad and Tori talk about how being a married couple is stressful, and we hear the blue team talk about how the red team, mainly Tori and Brad, haven't performed well or been tested in the season, and all Tyler does is eat, according to Bananas, and they end up making fun of Tyler's eating a few times here, even with a montage. Tyler talks about how there's no unity on the team, and Brad is talking about how he wanted to go to the gulag early on in the season to prove himself, but his wife prevented him from doing so, and the married couple end up arguing about strategy in addition to the communication issues, while Paula is literally just sitting there awkwardly doing her makeup, which I found funny. And he calls her out for communicating like a 5-year-old, so clearly nothing changed from the duel too. Highball is the daily where they end up holding onto some large platform where the ball has to stay on and they can't let it bump off the platform as they climb some hill to put the ball into a basket. And I really do like this daily challenge, as it is something simple on the surface, but it's pretty difficult in actuality, and I wish they did this more often. And I think they only did it this time, which is unfortunate. Sarah and Laura do end up abandoning the throwing idea, but the great team ends up winning their challenge, despite all the tension, and most of the nominees here end up volunteering to go in, with Tori and Tyler also being nominated for the red team, and Teresa and Johnny being nominated for the blue team. Tori is debating about whether she wants to stay or not. She does this literally every single season, since she knows that running the final is hard, and she hasn't been running with the team, I guess just on their off time. Brad mentions a few times that Tyler was going in even if he didn't volunteer, which also showed that Brad was full of shit about how he talks about wanting to go in to prove himself earlier on. And they set up Tyler and Bananas going into elimination together due to the history going back to the duel, but unfortunately it is all for naught due to the mercenary twist being introduced for the very first time. Back up off me is the elimination, where each of the nominees have to compete against Tina and CT. Teresa ends up beating Tina, but it's based on time, so if Tori gets a shorter time, it doesn't really matter, and that is essentially what happened. Banana gets literally carried by CT in the backpack moment, which is one of the most infamous moments of the show's history, and Tyler does last 20 seconds, as Bananas was out in 19 seconds. Apparently, Bananas has gone on record to say that he believes the mercenary twist happened, especially with CT being chosen because the production did not want him to win, so they felt like this was their way to rig him out, since they clearly preferred Kenny and Evan at this point in time. Though, I don't know if he would have beaten Tyler if it was just the two of them anyways. Essentially, Tina threw it as a wedding present to Tori, which Tina confirmed, which ensured Tori getting a quicker time than Teresa. Teresa did have her argument with Camilla in the very first episode, where she came off as a complete ass, but she literally was like invisible after that and was very under the radar. I don't have much else to say about her here, though it was impressive that she was one of the last blue team members, and she definitely had a right to be pissed off with her elimination, since she most likely does beat Tori in this elimination, and the mercenary stuff definitely screwed her, especially with Tina throwing it for Tori. Bananas was actually more subdued here, and I don't know if likable is the actual word that I want to use for him here, but he was borderline tolerable this season. He did get into a fight with a random, and had some good shady confessionals against Tyler, and had himself well while people wanted to go at him and started like taunting him. But I do think that it was a result of him not having the battery put in his back by Kenny and Evan, kind of exemplifying that he's not as tough. Jen and Derek primarily plot with Sarah to get the gray team to lose so the blue team can win, and they can team up so the gray team can finally get rid of Kamiya. And she does end up reporting this to Laura, and by she, I mean Sarah tells this to Laura, who is definitely a bit iffy about this. Riot Act is the daily where they have to push off their opponent off the platform, and they have long plastic shields to push people off and to protect themselves. Laura and Sarah are clearly throwing the challenge, and April is yelling at the woman about this, but Laura realizes that she needs to try, since she's being called out now and she could easily be voted in. Despite everything, the Grey Team does win the challenge, and Abraham confronts the two women about throwing the challenge, which Laurel denies, and it causes them to argue even more, which really isn't so much for all of this tension right before the final, which they are all in now. Paula gets very paranoid about being booted right before the final, and she tells Dunbar that he better not vote her in, since they promised to take her to the final, and it isn't fair that the married couple gets to go to the end and get the biggest piece of the pie, and Brad clearly doesn't give a fuck. And Dunbar clearly isn't forgetting about her voting him in a few rounds earlier. So Derek has to go in since there's no other man left, where Emily is named the other blue nominee, where Tyler and Paula are also the nominees for the red team. Paula flicks off her team, though some of the red members mention that Tori went in once, where Paula hasn't went in at all this season. Laurel decides to call out Carmaria, and she mentions that this isn't Fresh Meat 2 anymore. Kara is the one who mentions that, and she says that she has proven herself this season, though Laurel clearly disagrees. Abram decides to get involved, where Laura and Sarah mention that they do not have to prove themselves, like Kara does. Laura and Carmira decide to argue once again on their own, where Laura mentions that she does not want to share money with her, and she doesn't think that Carmira is ready to run a final, where Carmira just wants Laurel's respect, and this is clearly the underlying tension between them and their entire relationship, which has lasted even up until now, though I doubt Carmira wants her respect anymore on the present day that I'm recording this. So, Tyler calls out Brad for not going in once again, and Brad mentions that Tyler should have stepped up against Abram during the daily, which Brad did. Brad mentions that he did his time, so he doesn't have to go in, and it's interesting that he became the type of person that he hated on his first Battle of the Sexes season, and it's just a really awful look on Brad. Paula and Dunbar decide to argue once again, since instead of communicating, he wrote a letter to her, but apparently this is like a month-old letter, and this pissed off Paula even more, where he feels pissed off that she voted him in a few rounds ago, and he never wants to speak to her again in real life or in the game. So, I completely forgot that Paula and Dunbar are paired together for X's 1, but I guess the fact that I forgot about it shows how I feel about that season, but maybe my mind will change once I watch that season for this rewatch. But yeah, clearly they end up speaking together or dealing with one another after this, so ignore everything I said about their fallout, really. Abram and Laurel once again argue about Carmia's performance, and Brad mentions that Paula has played everyone in the season. Paula posts the letter that Dunbar wrote to her 4 weeks ago on the fridge, and she continues to rant to whomever she can, and I don't even know if they actually spoke after this season, so this might have been the end. Pull Me Over is the elimination where Tyler beats Derek and Emily beats Paula. Derek was just there this season, but that's been the case for the last few seasons. I don't know if it was him who decided to take a long time off or production decided to not cast him, but he would come back for 10 seasons and for the entirety of Era 3. But he didn't annoy me like the last few seasons, but I kind of just got tired of his repeatedness with just being solely about the competition and not offering anything else. But he didn't really have his allies there like that, except for Johnny, but Johnny himself was more subdued. Paula had an interesting season, with some of the fights that she had with some of the people on the cast, women and men, but she ended up getting screwed over yet again by the other guys, so it wasn't by the GEKD crew this season, but by another set of men, mainly Dunbar and Brad. She brought a lot to the season and had an entertaining enough downfall here. Brad is talking about how this is his last season and he would like to win it, but he's going to celebrate his retirement whether he wins or not. The Grey Team decide that they need to put their bullshit aside and they are ready to work as a team to win the final. Speaking of the final, it is Checkpoint, where they have to run to several checkpoints where the first one is shooting the 5 targets, and then the second one is that they have to slide into some pit or whatever. There's a few ride checkpoints and another one where they have to carry/push tires or something along the lines of that. I don't even remember. I don't care. This is how you know I don't really focus much on finals. Anyways, Abram is feeling very off and is throwing up and is having spasms to the point where he is DQ'd. Sarah soon ends up throwing up and she does not want to get DQ'd, but her team wants her to do it since she's holding them back, where Cara Maria mentions that this is Sarah's karma. I heard that this might have been due to some water poisoning or maybe just heat exhaustion and the water they had wasn't good or it wasn't distributed properly enough, something along the lines of that. Anyways, there was a puzzle and crawling under some barbed wire military style wise in the final where the red team wins and the gray team comes in second and the blue team comes in third. Emily was definitely the rookie of the year as she was the only one who made it to the finals and she won a few eliminations, but she was missing a lot of personality moments where the only ones that I got from her or that I recall are from her interactions with Ty. Jen had a somewhat calmer season, though she still had that fight with Paula, and despite the losing streak, she never went into elimination and played well enough with her position. She has one more season left, and from my memory, she shows her entire ass there. Abram definitely had a strong season here. He was arguably the best performer out of the entire cast, had a very polarizing showmance with Carmilla, which definitely has not aged well, and brought some energy out of the Era 1 veterans. So I welcomed his presence here, where it's really his last standout season that was a positive one as well. Sarah was still the entitled, smug woman she was on the last season, but at least she made it to the end here and brought some drama with her fight with people like Siobhan, Abram, and Cara, with her DQ being karmic. Luke was a chill presence throughout the season, but without an Evelyn there, he was too under the radar, so I'm not shocked that he never came back, especially when their relationships were tied to the theme of many of the Era 3 seasons. Laura showed her entire ass and whole the season, and more than made up for the lack of character moments that I mentioned last season here. She was definitely entertaining in the season, but she definitely uses her size and aggression against other people, as she felt like she was owed something, despite this being her second season. Carmilla had her showmance with Abram that had people pressed and bothered, but she was nowhere near the competitor as the other woman, though her feuds with Laura and Sarah did get interesting near the end of the season. I might as well talk about Brad and Tori at the same time, as they were irritating as hell. Oftentimes, watching couples play the game together on reality TV, but especially the challenge, is never fun, and they exhibited that with their entitlement, hypocrisy, and cowardly gameplay, not even from the fact that they threw in the same people, but the refusal to be honest and to actually own it. I'm glad Tori retired after this, and I'm glad Brad retired for years after this, though he came back as a result of his divorce from Tori. Tyler came back a lot more fit this season and was pretty quiet for the first 2/3 of the season, though people like Derek and Johnny made fun of him always eating, but he became more interesting in the last few episodes of the season and was a bit more fiery. Dunbar got a really quiet and under the radar edit, and I remember this being the case on his last season, so he clearly wasn't bringing much of anything. He had that weird fallout with Paula, but he didn't bring anything else to the season. Apparently he had to give up his prize money due to filming pornography on another network, so that's interesting, at least. Alrighty, so that concludes Cutthroat, and it was definitely an interesting experience watching the season for the rewatch, where I've watched the prior 19 seasons, so I have all the context. Compared to when I watched the season for the first time a year ago, I was comparing it to a lot of the recent seasons, so like the late 30 seasons, and there's a stark difference. So I guess my rose-tinted glasses were off, but I definitely do really like this season. I definitely do think that every once in a while, you definitely need a season where you remove a lot of the big-time vets, you give all the rookies, or some of the more recent rookies, or the newer veterans, a chance to really make names for themselves, to create new dynamics, all that stuff, to see who will sink and who will swim, and I feel like this season definitely did that. The format is perfect, and while we do see 3 team seasons here and there in mainly Era 4 seasons, it's usually done for a brief period of time and it's never consistent throughout the season. I don't know why they decided to really end the large team season, since I believe this is the last one, just from my recollection. But maybe they wanted to get rid of all the predictability in it, or they just couldn't afford to have such large casts anymore. But yeah, I guess this being the last major team season signifies the end of an era where the team seasons were very prominent in Era 2, and since they weren't divided by road rules or real world, they created a lot of these weird team dynamics or these weird team themes and all that stuff. You definitely see a lot of the Era 1 people, and even some of the Era 2 people start to either outright retire here, or they're winding down when it comes to their time on the show. And some of the newer people from this season, and even some from the last few seasons, will become big names later on, while others only did a few seasons. So it's definitely interesting. So I am currently working on my Era 2 write-up, and it's going to be interesting because not only am I going to break down the themes and the commonalities of the eras, but while I've been watching each of these last 10 seasons, I've outlined which people are from Era 1 and which people are from Era 2 to see the transition, to see when one era fell off, when the other era took over, and all that stuff, and I'll go more into detail about that. So yeah, Cutthroat is a good season. It's probably not a great season, and I definitely do see a lot more of the flaws now compared to when I watched it the first time, and I understand why some people aren't as high on it. But I do think it was a solid end to the era, and without this season, I don't think we would be able to have Rivals, which that season gave some of the big names a break from the season, but we also saw a lot of the interactions from this season and the last season, and even some that are a bit older, to be able to form a rival season and these more relationship-based themed seasons. So thank you all for watching, and I'll be back with more content soon on both channels. Take care!